Today we want to open up the conversation, the space, talk about triggers. Talk about
We
triggers.
do.
Triggers in myself. Like what does a trigger mean? Like what is it that's mine and what is it that's theirs? And also like triggers within the four walls of a house versus triggers within the community and exploring the difference between that. Yeah.
Yeah. What is a trigger? Are
Hmm.
they normal? Do people think they're not? What is it? How I'm going to ask you. I don't know if I've ever actually asked you how would you actually define what a trigger is?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question because there's so many I judge different definitions, and those that are watching would love to hear what your definition is. Put into the chat. Love to unpack that, right? So when I think of a trigger, initially I think of a reaction, like a
Mm.
reactivity in my body that causes me to act unconsciously, like immediately. And so it could be a stimulus of what someone's doing, a stimulus of what I'm doing to myself, the stimulus of the environment or situation that causes this reactivity in my body to, yeah, react. Yeah. So that's my simple definition of a trigger.
Okay, a
What about you?
reaction.
Yeah, reaction.
Um, I guess I have a bit of a different definition. I would define triggers in a few ways. One as pointing us to some unhealed part of us. So, like we say, we call triggers mirrors, um, and it's an energetic response, right? This thing that's been push, or they say pushing your buttons triggers, um, eliciting something that's been kind of tucked away for a while that gets remembered in this instant, and our nervous system gets reactivated. Um, I think of triggers as a remembering as well. Remembering an incident or a trauma. Triggers are linked to trauma. And I define trauma as just any time that something happens to us that our nervous system is dysregulated and we don't know how to process what just went on. And I think we come from a very traumatic, violent culture. There's so much war in our world and division. Even the idea of lawyers to me is strange, and I hope we have a culture that eventually doesn't need them, um, because they're paid to judge people and prove who's right and wrong. Um, but I think the base of it all goes back to how we treat each other and our children. And as we can start to trust our own body and check into our own reactions and start to breathe and regulate, we get the insight as to what we needed and didn't get, so that those reactive responses become less and less energized, less negative, less destructive. That's my long winded answer.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love how you brought up as a button. There's a button being pushed in me right now, and that these buttons are there for my life experiences, my trauma, my ancestral patterns that are embedded into my soul, my body. I love that. And Michael here, welcome, brother. Great to have you with us. The Adaptive Men says, trigger for me, undigested emotional energy around a previous event
Yeah.
or part of ourselves personality that's externally stimulated, causing us to physiologically feel as though we're in that event.
Yeah, I love that definition.
Oh, great definition, brother. And I love how Michael says mood science. Yeah, woo science. When I think of woo woo, I think of the spiritual realm. I think of like
Mm.
the knowing, and it's this ability where let me test this belief, this spiritual belief. Let me just test it for myself and then see the results in my life. And then that proves it, right? Because science is always catching up to spirituality, right?
It is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Science comes from a place of what's known, what's measurable. Though I can measure spirituality by testing the concepts over the
Yeah.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. I love how Michael said it's a
Oh,
stimulus.
woohoo science. Oh, you meant to
Woohoo.
celebrate. Woohoo
Oh.
science. Woo science. So I went down a path there.
It's okay. It was valid.
Yeah.
It's
And
true.
Naomi says, yeah, great definition, Michael. Reliving the old moment in the present. Ooh. Hmm.
Yeah, reliving the old moment in the present. So that's where energy, there's no time base. This is like, for me, how we actually time travel is through triggers because whatever's present in the body's been there that entire time. And as soon as we can process that trigger, it's like it never happened. It heals the present and the past simultaneously. Um, and I
Hmm.
love that he said stimulus because that person who triggers us is simply a stimulus to identify in us what most needs to be healed, what's left to be healed. So they're really our greatest gifts, actually. Although
Right.
they don't feel that way sometimes.
Mm.
No.
Yeah. So this notion of like what's mine, what isn't, when two people come together, like for example, if it's just by myself and someone cuts me off in traffic and I just blow a casket, I know that's on me because I'm in the vehicle, right? And I'm just throwing swear words or whatever. That's easy for me to own. That's just my perspective.
But
But
someone
then
cut
let's
you
say
off.
it's
I would blame the guy who cut me off. I mean, why not?
well in the moment. Um, I'm saying more of like this is for me, like the distinction of if I was in a relationship with you and talking with you, it's easier for me to like just put that on you, right? Because I'm interacting with you, I'm having conversations. So, what would you say to like people dueling it out and you're getting triggered with each other?
Oh, I think we
How
had a
how
couple.
how would how would someone see themselves more clearly to know what's theirs and what isn't? You
Ah,
know? That makes sense?
yeah. The first thing I always say and look in is to whether people are in their head or in their bodies, if they're coming from their internal frame of reference or they're judging the other person. It's super easy to blame and point fingers. And I notice it takes people out and they're very much in their head. There's a lot of anger, judgment. We haven't been taught how to be comfortable in our bodies. It comes from a lot of abuse and different things where we didn't feel safe. But the answers really are in the body. Our body sensations, our feelings, our knowing. Our body remembers. It is this technological, biological technology that stores energetic information. And so for me, the true healing comes when we can start to know how energy moves through our body conduit, which for me is really a conduit to truth. As people get sick or their relationships break down and they enter these crises, there's an element of truth in there for us to be aligned to who we are authentically, but also to source that which gives us life, um, and that knows that some of the ways that we've been brought up isn't life giving, and I believe we can really heal through each other, not just as couples, but in community. And I'll leave it at that.
Hmm. Yeah. I'll like add to that by, using myself for example, like going back to my reactivity.
Mm,
If I'm reacted to some stimulus by someone, then that's mine to own, right? In our culture of victimhood and wanting to be seen and heard comes this need to be like I'm right. You need to
aggressive.
hear me. I need to be validated, right? And when two people are in that space of wanting to be heard, no one is heard. It becomes a battle between who's right and who's wrong. So we talk about getting entrenched.
Yes.
We're in the trenches of World War I. And once I make the shift of like that awareness of like, yeah, I am actually in the trenches, and I can come from a place of owning my stuff. Oh my God, is it ever refreshing? It then opens up the space for that other person to then move out of being defensive and owning their stuff as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm not like, hey, you should validate my experience. Rather, I own my experience. That's a big paradigm shift.